If you think airplane food is bad, imagine being the first person in space and realizing your entire menu comes from meat paste tubes. That was Yuri Gagarin's reality. When he orbited the Earth in 1961, his food had to be squeezed directly into his mouth like toothpaste. It wasn't tasty, it wasn't pretty, but it worked. That first experiment proved something important. Humans could swallow and digest food in space. Scientists weren't sure if our stomachs could really function properly in space without gravity. Would the food float in the stomach? Would digestion grind to a halt? Yuri Gagarin's experiment showed that it did work, but diet eating wasn't really enjoyable. Welcome back to Fuel for the Final Frontier, my exploration of astronaut nutrition and how they fuel their journeys beyond Earth. In this episode, we'll trace the remarkable evolution of space food, from unappetizing tubes and cubes to today's multicultural, carefully engineered menus, showing how what's on the menu tells the story of our entire adventure in space. Let's talk about the first American missions, Mercury and Gemini. The in the American Mercury missions, astronaut meals were even less appealing. Bite-sized compressed cubes and freeze-dried powders sealed in plastic. Astronauts had to rehydrate their powders with tiny water guns, knead the food bags, and suck mush through the straws. These the cubes, meanwhile, crumbled easily, and the crumbs in zero gravity became dangerous, floating into instruments, air vents, or machinery, potentially damaging them. Wally Schirra, one of the Mercury astronauts, famously complained about the menu. He joked that toothpaste meals might work for the machines, but not for humans. This feedback pushed NASA to improve the food for the Gemini missions in the mid 1960s. By Gemini, the food still consisted mostly of freeze-dried meals, but the packaging advanced. Instead of metal tubes or crumbling cubes, astronauts ate from plastic pouches. These were lighter, easier to store, less messy, and safer. But the food still wasn't great. It, although it did no longer make astronauts seem miserable, which was a big step forward. After which came the Apollo mission, you know, and the race to the moon. When the program set its sights on the moon, lasting from 1968 to 1972, astronaut diets had to improve again. Apollo astronauts were gone for up to 2 weeks at a time. They needed full, real meals, not just snacks. Freeze dried meals at this time dominated the menu. Beef stew, chicken with rice, scrambled eggs, and were just some of the meals that were available to them. Hot water dispensers here allowed astronauts to rehydrate the meals with warm water, which helped improve the flavor and texture but didn't really substitute for proper meals. Apollo astronauts also had the first spoons in space, meaning meals didn't have to be drunk or squeezed. They could be eaten more normally. Variety increased here, but astronauts still got tired of it really quickly. Buzz Aldrin later said one of his biggest cravings after returning from the moon was a plain, fresh salad. That craving for freshness remains one of the hardest challenges even today. But after the Apollo mission came Skylab. In the 90s, it was launched in the 1970s. It was America's first space station. Its dining room was a huge leap forward from previous missions. Skylab crews stayed in space for months, not days. That meant food options had to support long-term morale. For the first time, astronauts had something that looked like a dining room. They sat at a table, strapped in, and heated their meals in small ovens. Menus expanded to over 70 different food items, including frankfurters, puddings, and even spaghetti. Freeze-dried food was still common, but Skylabs introduced canned foods and canned and thermostabilized foods in pull-tab containers. The thermostabilized foods are just foods that are processed using heat to destroy pathogens, spoilage, microorganisms, and enzymes, making them shelf stable even at room temperature. Astronauts could now share meals together, something vital for mental health during long missions. Skylab proved that food wasn't just about nutrition anymore, it was about quality of life. Eating together became a ritual, strengthening teams and easing isolation. Then came the shuttle era, where space food could both be personalized and fresh. From 1981 to 2011, the Space Shuttle became NASA's workhorse. The shuttle missions typically lasted 7 to 14 days, but space food entered an entirely new era. With bigger kitchens, refrigerators, and freezers, astronauts had much more variety. Menus expanded to about 200 options, carefully taste tested on Earth. Astronauts even filled out food preference questionnaires for selecting their meals before each flight. For the first time, there was a choice. Tacos, pasta, seafood, and even dessert was all accessible to them. NASA solved the crumb problem by replacing bread with tortillas, which quickly became a staple. Astronauts could finally enjoy wraps, sandwiches, and snacks that felt closer to home. Fresh food even started to appear. Apples, carrots, and tortillas often flew in the fresh food lockers. These didn't really last long, but for astronauts, biting into an apple after weeks of packaged meals was like tasting heaven. The shuttle also allowed for astronauts from different countries and nations to bring in food from their culture. Russians introduced canned goods, Japanese shared soy based dishes, and international menus began to emerge. Finally came the rise of the ISS era, where one could enjoy multicultural dining in orbit. Starting in the 2000s, this was where astronaut cuisine truly reached maturity. Space agencies from the US, Russia, Japan, Europe, and Canada collaborated to create a global menu. Today, the ISS maintains about 200 different food items. These include thermostabilized stews, pastas, and freeze-dried soups, eggs, as well as irradiated meals, and a wide range of snacks. Russian cosmonauts brought borscht, beet soup, and rye bread. Japanese astronauts enjoy miso soup and ramen. Fresh astronauts have even flown in with duck confit, a courtesy of their chefs. Even espresso setups have been tested. ISS astronauts choose their meals months in advance. Tasting options during training, personalization is critical. Each astronaut tailors their diet to taste preferences, caloric needs, and cultural comfort foods. Shared meals are part of life on board the station, strengthening crew bonds and lifting spirits in isolation. Still, storage and preservation remain hurdles. Vitamins degrade over time and fresh produce is rare, arriving only with resupply ships. That's why astronauts celebrate fresh food delivery days almost like holidays. Romaine lettuce, for example, flown up on resupply, often disappears within hours. But one might ask, what about the future? If you can access multicultural dining now, is there really any need for more innovation and creation? Looking back, astronaut food has come a long way, from toothpaste tubes and crumbly cubes to 200 item international menus. But the story isn't finished. While we've solved crumb control, improved packaging, and boosted variety, the next frontier is about self sufficiency. Future missions to Mars may last years, meaning astronauts will need to grow or produce their own meals. Hydroponics, lab grown proteins, and even 3D printed meals are already in testing. The evolution of space food reflects the evolution of human spaceflight itself. As we progress from short hops to long stays, diets grew from rare survival to cultural comfort. Food became not just necessary but pleasurable, helping astronauts stay healthy both physically and emotionally. So, next time you unwrap a sandwich, remember that simple act took decades of trial and error to perfect it before it was perfected in zero gravity. For our next episode, we'll dive into how astronauts prepare their bodies for these diets even boarding a flight. Pre-flight nutrition training is just as critical as the meals in space, and it reveals how every astronaut's diet is personalized to fit their journey into orbit. If you liked the video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, a comment, or even sharing it with your friends. Thank you for watching.